So now we're ready to import the mesh into ZBrush and start painting those details. So I'm gonna turn on UV group, and you can see that all the groups that I created in Max are showing up here, so I can isolate any part of the model, and so it's make it easier to work. I'm not gonna subdivide the mesh too much right now. I'm gonna paint all the major details on the entire body before I start separating parts, and then I will do a beauty pass at the end by creating cranking up the subdivision level to the maximum and redo some of the fine details. That's where we have the best result in Max with the normal maps. But right now I'm gonna just paint a little bit of bumps and just rework the basic shapes. So I'm just using the standard brush right now, adding and subtracting, really roughly going over all the shapes and refining a little bit more the bumps and skin folds. Gonna add a little bit more bumps here. Where the modeling start to fade into a smooth part, that's where I'm gonna have to add those extra details that I'm gonna use with normal maps in Max. So I don't want to change the proportions of the mesh itself right now, so I'm really focusing on all those small details, but I'm still gonna use the move tool to just adjust a little bit better those shapes, and so at the end I'm gonna have to export the mesh, the low-res mesh from ZBrush, and import it back in Max. I'm gonna try to do that only on the head, because the legs and arms gonna stay pretty much the same for the basic proportions. So just adding some more tendons around the mouth, some skin folds, all the details that I couldn't really have with Max without subdividing the mesh too much. All those details I'm gonna be able to paint them right now. So because ZBrush always smooth out when you add one more level of subdivision, I'm not gonna really work the details right now. I'm gonna try to lay out the main skin folds and shapes, and later on when I'm gonna add one more level of subdivisions, then I'm gonna crank it up to the maximum, and I'm gonna use alpha maps in projection mode. That way I can have really small details, really refined details. But right now it's just basic sculpting. Smoothing out, always painting the details a little bit bigger than what you want, and then just come back and smooth it out. Trying to get those rib skin fold that he have on the side of his mouth. And the inflate tool is also a good way to achieve some nice organic shapes. So I'm just gonna have to redo the same kind of details on the other side, but that shouldn't be a problem. If you really know what you're doing, then you can almost redo the same thing on the other side. And it's good that you keep both sides of the head really asymmetrical. So the video is really fast right now. I didn't want to spend too much time and maybe repeating myself, so it's going really fast, so you can see right away all the changes that I'm doing. It's about 4 times faster. But again, ZBrush is such a great software. You can really work pretty fast with ZBrush. Laying out those wrinkles, skin folds under his chin. Just make sure they're at the right spot, and without any details right now, but just reshaping everything and adding a little bit more details everywhere. Basically getting ready for the second pass of painting with the more refined details. So hopefully all those changes will really show up with normal maps. I'm also gonna use a dot map, a cavity map, and that way all those details gonna show up a little bit better. With Max you can't really use the you can't really use the displacement with Max. It's just not working really well. So you have to deal with normal maps, but it's good enough for cinematic animations. So adding more organic bumps on the brain, trying to break the symmetry as much as possible, trying to give some nice organic shape to that brain. And you can see I'm not only working on the brain, I'm going to work on other parts as well. Just going through everything right now and trying to add the same kind of details, trying to keep the same quality everywhere. And with the Alt on your keyboard, you can switch from add to subtract, so really quickly adding some bumps and then subtracting on some places. It's also good to check the lights. In ZBrush you can change the direction of your lights, so right now with this kind of details I don't really need, but when you start doing alphas it's really good to check what you did with another light angle, so you're sure that you're not doing something that's gonna look funny later. Trying to lay out those weird wires that he have on his face. All this gonna disappear when I'm gonna add more subdivisions, but it's really good for me to just put them in there so I kind of know where they're gonna be and how it's gonna look like. Defining a little bit more the side of his face here. Make sure you can start reading some kind of muscles. Just give you some ideas of what kind of details you can do. Something you wouldn't think about without looking at some pictures of, again, insects or animals. So still refining everything. Keep that in mind when you're painting. Just make sure that you're not inflating too much some parts and they end up penetrating each other. So just going through, sculpting the details. And moving some parts as well. Really quickly doing some last reshaping on the head just to break the symmetry. So you see I'm checking right now with the lights to see what I did. When I get to a certain point, when I'm happy with it, I'm just gonna double check with a different lighting to see if everything is working well. And I already have all the main details really modeled in Max already, so now it's really fun to come and just work around it, work with those major details and just detail them a little bit more. I really don't have to worry about the shape of his mouth or the shape of his chin. I already have that. I just have to make it look even better with some skin folds and give it a little bit more weight, a little bit more plumpy. And I'm gonna start working in the projection view. So the tool I'm always using is the deco brush. It's really the perfect tool to achieve nice skin folds on your model really quickly. So as you can see, I'm just drawing the skin folds a little bit everywhere. And it's also a good way to make a transition from one muscle to another. Using the sensitivity of the tablet, you can really get some skin fold that's gonna fade into a muscle or another shape. So I'm just painting those skin folds with the decor brush until I'm happy with it. So every time I paint, you're gonna see that I undo a lot of things. I'm just trying to paint and then undo it and then paint it again until I get the right direction for the skin fold. Start to work on his breasts a little bit more. Reshaping it quickly. And the fact that you're reshaping without the symmetry, it's also gonna really break the symmetry on your character. Gonna give it a more organic, natural look, more realistic than if it was just pure symmetry. So go back to projection, and I'm working on the transition between the arm and the head right now, creating some kind of muscles that are attached to the head. Just to have a more natural transition between those two parts. Smoothing out a little bit. And I'm not trying to spend too much time on that pass. I'm just trying to get it right really quickly, and so I can move on another part of the body. But still, it's really take a long time to. You can spend as much time as you want. I could really spend twice the amount of time just doing some details, but you know, when you're working for a production, most of the time you have really tight schedule, and you really have to deal with that by really getting the best amount of details and in a really short time. There's also a big part that I'm not showing, but it's about cleaning the mesh and making it working with the pipeline that we have. So that can take a long time. It's depend on what character you're doing. This kind of character have no hair, so that's a good thing. But a lot of modeling detail and stuff, so trying to match the concept a little bit better with the mouth. It's really a very important part of the model, the mouth and the chin. And you can see that all the skin fold that I painted with the deco brush, I'm just going back right now with the inflate and paint the inflate on top of it, so they look more more fatty wrinkles. Just make them a little bit more organic. So that's really something I'm doing all the time, painting really quickly the folds, wrinkles with deco brush, and then using the inflate tool to reshape them, make them a little bit more fat. So I'm starting to have a nice amount of details. I'm gonna make sure everything have a good shape, but so far it's going pretty well. So I'm gonna try to do the same thing on the other side of the head later. It's not really important if the two sides are not exactly the same. They can even have like different details, just like a and on his body. I'm just gonna keep the symmetry for the arms and legs, so I don't have to paint that twice. For this kind of production you want to go fast, so everything you can optimize and have a symmetry on, it's always good to try and keep it that way. But for the heads or bodies, it's usually good to have asymmetrical maps and modeling. So now I start working on the rest of his body, going down to the torso kind of part, and quickly sculpting some more skin folds and details in there. Make those kind of orifice a little bit more fat and plumpy. And adding some irregularities a little bit everywhere. So I really don't have much to do. Everything is already laid out on the modeling part. So now it's really the fun part. Just coming in and adding all those nice details. Refining the abs a little bit more. And working on the transitions between one part and the other. So same process here. I'm just painting those details with the standard brush first, and then if needed I'm gonna switch to a projection mode and paint, like on the side of his body I want some nice skin fold in there, so I'm gonna switch to projection master, and using the deco brush I'm gonna come in and just draw those skin folds really quickly. You just have to adjust your brush the size you want it, and then with the pressure you just fade those skin folds from one muscle to the other, or from the back to the front. And then using the inflate, I'm just gonna come and make those a little bit more fat. Painting the same skin folds on the other side, trying to match as much as possible. You're always going to end up having one side that looks better to the other, but a little bit better to make a better transition between texturing and modeling. I'm gonna create some smaller ones. So you see that I'm working on the whole body right now. I'm switching from one part to the other. That's really usually the way I work. It's a really fast way to work. I might come back to some parts later, but I'm just jumping on everything I see and painting it. But every technique is possible. You could really like focus on one part and not worrying about anything else and then jumping to another one. But for me, you can see that I'm adding details a little bit everywhere, and I think it's a good way to really stay consistent in the amount of details and what kind of details you're sculpting right now. So you're sure that every part's gonna pretty much look the same. They're gonna have the same kind of details everywhere. You're not gonna start detailing one part too much and end up not having enough time to work another one. So I'm looking at the leg right now. I'm gonna reshape that. It's also a good time to really all those articulations that are not looking really nice in Max, I can come and reshape that to give it more like a bone shape. Adding some wrinkles on his legs, and I'm gonna paint some volumes on that pad that he have. Just simply give it some more bump, some more definition. And I'm not worrying about all the extra details right now. I'm just painting everything the way I want it, with the same amount of subdivisions everywhere. And then from there I can take any part and just isolate it and start doing some more refined details. That's what I'm gonna do later. So again, refining those bones area, articulations. Right now they look really round and smooth, so I'm adding some more definition to it. Quickly adding some ribs on his tail. And as I'm doing that, I already have an idea of what part gonna be soft skin, soft skin, and what part gonna be more of a insect shell. So I'm not gonna do skin folds on some parts that I think are gonna be hard parts. I'm gonna try to do different details according to what material gonna be applied on that part. So the head and the tail basically are gonna be really different materials. The tail is gonna be more like a scorpion kind of scales material, and the head gonna be more made of skin. So the details are really different. So you can also create a mask and isolate one part if you really want to focus on that and not worrying about anything else. I'm jumping too much from one part to the other, so that's a good way to really focus on one part only, hiding everything else and just working on that arm right there. So again, give it some more specific shapes and trying to understand what part are gonna be soft and what part will be more hard. So there's a lot of details to add inside this arm here. It's really the modeling is really simple, but the normal map's gonna add all those extra details that I'm gonna need there for the renders. Refining the tendons a little bit more, and those kind of fingers where the claws are gonna start from. So again, I really want to focus on that part, so I'm gonna isolate it and just work on that. Trying to get it to look a little bit more organic and almost like a hand with some muscles at the base, and you can feel the tendon that controls that claw. It's always good to also try to think about how all this work, like just like a human body. If you have some articulations there, you need to think about it. And if you have like the back of his hand, I'm really referring to a human hand, so there's a lot of tendons in there, and you really can describe the muscles and the bones and the structure of the arm, and that's really gonna help you to know what kind of details you're gonna paint here, because on the concept that I have, some parts are really not visible, so I have to imagine what kind of detail I can add to make it look cool. So on the back of his, on the other side of his arm, I'm gonna use a technique for that I'm using a lot when I'm doing some insect characters. It's like I'm gonna paint some dots, some little bumps, just by cranking up the subdivision level and painting really quickly, moving really fast with your pencil. You're gonna have that dot look. All those dots gonna start showing up, so I'm gonna use that technique on the arms and the legs, and on top of that I'm gonna add some alpha maps as well. There's a lot of work to do on the back of his head also. It's just a lot of details that I need to add in there. It's kind of flat right now. The brain is really not looking good, so I'm gonna start working on the brain, trying to have a better connection with the head, and I'm gonna try to add some extra folds and details to that brain. So here I'm really using a small brush and painting those details really quickly, and after that I still can come back and smooth that out, and also with the inflate tool, just make those details look a little bit more fatty. Trying to blend the brain onto the head a little bit better, and so you can see with the inflate I really get those details to look more organic. Quickly adding some volumes, a bit of muscle definition. So I'm still using the inflate tool, and I really have to be careful not to go too far with that inflate tool on those skin folds. So again, that's as much time as I can spend on the ZBrush part, but you could really spend a lot of time doing all those nice detail a little bit better. Always trying to do the best you can with a short amount of time. That really is the big challenge where I'm working in Blur. It's always you always have so little time to do really complex stuff, so you need to find ways to go around it and go as fast as you can, but still have the best quality that you can have. So again, adding some extra details, asymmetrical details, really quickly painting all those shapes, and you can see that the back of his head start looking like something decent. So I'm not using any kind of crazy tools, I'm just really simply painting all those extra bumps and skin folds on my basic mesh. And I still can add 1 or 2 level of subdivisions on every part to work with the alpha maps in projection mode. When you look at it from the side, it's not looking good at all. It's most of the time the extrusions are a little bit too intense, so you really need to look your mesh from every angle and make sure that you're not going too crazy with the extrusion on some parts. So I start to have some interesting details a little bit everywhere, and now I can really see what amount of details and what kind of quality I want to put everywhere on his body with that first pass of ZBrush. But I still have a lot of details to paint in his back, arms and legs. So I'm gonna separate that in different chapters. I'm basically gonna do the same thing on the other parts, but I'm also gonna use the alpha maps in projection mode and that kind of things. If you've gone too far with some details, you still can go back to a lower resolution and try to smooth that out or just paint over it. That's the really the good thing about ZBrush, is you always can go back to lower res and change everything. So I'm starting to lose some details with that inflate tool that I used on his back, so that's why I go back to a lower res and try to bring those details back. So now I'm just jumping to another part. I'm gonna work on his back. So there's a lot of definitions in the modeling already on his back. So I just have to come and just redraw those details, give them some more bump and some more asymmetrical shapes. And of course it's a good time to really look at the concept, have it open on another screen or just print it on a piece of paper and just really look at it all the time as you're doing all those details. First, it's a good way to make sure you're matching the concept at that stage, and it's also going to give you some ideas of what kind of details you need to put and where you need to put them. So I always have the concept open somewhere. So we almost done with that first part. I'm gonna work on other parts in the next chapter. So we are done with that one.